Good afternoon and welcome to the Chamber's 2024 Congressional Meeting Series. I'm Bruce Stidworthy, Chairman of the Chamber Board and CEO of Bohannon Houston. I wanted to start by welcoming our President and CEO, Terri Cole, and to our audience, thank you for joining our virtual event today. We're pleased to welcome all three members of New Mexico's Congressional Delegation for a conversation on important issues facing our city and state. We've been holding this event for years, and it's always one of our favorites. A House vote last June put this event on hold until today. Bringing what's happening in Washington, D.C. back home directly to our business community is so important to us. Before we get started, however, I'd like to recognize some really great companies and organizations who are sponsoring today's event. They are P&M Resources, President and CEO, Don Terry. New Mexico Mutual, President and CEO, Kelly Mixon. The University of New Mexico and its president, Garnett Stokes, including UNM Health Sciences Center, UNM Health, UNM Comprehensive Cancer Center, UNM Athletics, and UNM Rainforest Innovations. Bernalillo County Manager, Julie Morgus-Baca. City of Albuquerque, Mayor Tim Keller. French Funerals and Cremations, President and CEO, Tom Antrim. Western Sky Community Care, Vice President of Operations, Ramon Martinez. Central New Mexico Community College, President Tracy Hartzler. Comcast, Vice President Chris Duncanson. Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Mexico, President Janice Torres. Fidelity Investments, Vice President of Public Affairs, Leanne Kravitz. Esparza Digital and Advertising, CEO Del Esparza. Our company, Bohannon Houston. KOB TV Vice President and General Manager, Michelle Donaldson. New Mexico Gas Company, President Ryan Shell. Bank of New Mexico Market CEO, Kyle Beasley. Excellent Schools New Mexico, Executive Director, Scott Hindman. U.S. Bank Business Banking Sales Manager, Howie Herbert. General Mills Albuquerque Plant Manager, Heather Zosch. Unirac CEO, Peter Lorenz. REDW, Principal Paul Madrid. Blockos CPAs, President Brad Stewart. Intel, Director of Public Affairs, Frank Gallegos. ABA Technologies, CEO, Andrew Baca. Sandia National Laboratories, COO and Deputy Laboratories Director, David Gibson. Thornburg Investment Management, CFO, Nimish Bhatt. And last but not least, Verizon, Manager of State and Local Government Affairs, Matthew Clark. Thank you to these great sponsors for their engagement and generosity. Okay, I mentioned in the introduction that last June, this program was interrupted by a vote, and we have the history repeating itself here a bit. But we hope to have all three members join us momentarily as soon as they conclude this vote. And so, Terri, we're going to ad lib here for a few minutes. Let's start with Mike. Tell us a little bit about what's going on at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center and some of the development that's going on there.
Well, thanks, Bruce and Terri, and hi, Representative. Nice to see you. You know, we have a lot going on over here. It's a real exciting year for us. We had an article in the paper yesterday that kind of pointed out a lot of the things we're doing, and it's just real exciting. We've got the co-op is going to open its doors by the end of the year. We have our entrepreneurial complex that's going to open. Interestingly, we set up a deal with Tesla to do a supercharging station here, be the largest in the Southwest. Of course, you probably read in the news that Musk fired everybody in the charging station unit. So we're interested to see whether that's going to come to fruition. We found out that because things are already in the contract phase that they plan on continuing with that. So we're excited about that. We're also getting ready to talk to the county about purchasing the 4-H property behind us. As I said, the entrepreneurial complex is coming online. We're gonna have a ribbon cutting ceremony here in the next 60 to 90 days on that building. So just never a dull moment over here. I told the team 23 was going to be the busiest year ever, and it turns out 24 is going to top that by probably 50%. So and 25 as well. So it's an exciting time for us. I think things are going well. Visitation is up. We've got a lot of visitors from out of state coming in. So that's always good that's a good barometer of what's happening in our community for the summer. So it's starting off strong. We're excited about that. So it's a good time. It's a good time, and we're not bored. That's for sure. Terri, what's going on? We've got some things coming up, right? What are some of the events we've got planned coming up next year?
Yes, let me, before I go there, let me do a quick check. Are the representatives ready?
Looks like Melanie's getting ready.
Yeah, Melanie, hi,
We
Melanie.
still have one more vote. We'll be done momentarily.
Okay, very good, thank you. So, so Mike, we've got our very popular Roadrunner trip coming up. It's set for September 18th and 20th, which, you know, on the surface sounds a long way away, but it's really not. It's going to be here before we know it. And we're doing a outdoor recreation and tourism trip to Enchanted Circle, which I think
wow.
is terrific. And especially that time of year. We're going to go to Taos and Cuesta and Red River, Eagle Nest and Angel Fire. Bruce, whenever you went on the Roadrunner trip last year, we did oil country. And as a business person, how did you like the experience?
That was fantastic. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed that visit as a business person, but also as an engineer. We got to see a ton of technical stuff with Oxy and some of their operations in the oil field. And then we also got a tour of the WIP facility there between Carlsbad and Hobbs, and you know, just really fascinating, incredible stuff that those companies are doing from a sort of technological perspective, but obviously also from an economic impact perspective. So it was great to get to see those things up close and personal. And I know that this upcoming one to up north is going to be a whole lot different feel, but it'll be equally as engaging and interesting. I'm sure of that.
Well, we thought going in September and seeing the beautiful colors of the fall would be a plus as well. Well, great. Also, we've got an annual meeting coming up, and that's scheduled for October 30th. And we went to Washington, D.C., as we do every year for our annual D.C. fly-in. And the major purpose of it really has to do with what we're doing today, which is to talk with our Congressional Delegation and visit with them, talk with them about the concerns and challenges and opportunities. And while on that D.C. trip, we went to an organization called the American Enterprise Institute. And we met a speaker there whose name is Robert Pondicio, and he is an expert in all things K through 12 education. He was very interesting and very well informed. And so we listened to him trace the education reform movement over all these many years. And it was like he was playing the movie for all of us who have been involved in education reform. He's just terrific. And I think our membership is going to enjoy seeing him very, very much and listening to him. So we're excited about that. We'll be at the convention center. And, you know, we've always had wonderful service there, and it's been terrific. So we're glad to be back there, Mike. So I hope you can join us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Sounds like fun.
Great. So we've got also coming up our public safety membership big meeting, and our DA will be our speaker, Sam Bregman. So we're looking forward to that. You know, all things public safety these days. We're also right now getting ready for the upcoming legislative session that the governor has called. So we've got a lot of focus on public safety, and isn't that terrific?
So important for our city and our state. And I think, as most of our audience knows, we've long been engaged on that topic, and Look forward to hopefully a good special session that is productive and has a good positive long-term impact on that issue that's been so challenging for our city and state for a long time.
Yeah, the one of the issues that I understand the governor's going to bring forward will be the issue of increasing penalties for felons who are arrested with a firearm. And we've supported that for quite some time, and I'm glad to know she's going to try to put that on the agenda. I know she's also going to introduce some legislation around behavioral health and trying to make everybody safer with respect to mental health issues and weapons. And so we'll be anxious to see what that legislation looks like. So I don't know if we're about ready yet or not. I see Representative Stansbury. Are we ready yet, do you think?
Yeah, I'm ready. It was in the chat. It looks like Teresa is still in transit. I'm not sure what Gabe and her status is.
All right, thank you. It looks like Gabe is on his way back to the office. So Bruce, back to you. Let's start with Representative Stansbury.
All right. So we've got a lot to talk about today, and we're going to jump right in. I'd like to introduce Janice Torres, President of Blue Cross and Blue Shield New Mexico, and a chamber board member. And she's going to introduce our special guests. Janice?
Thank you, Bruce. It's certainly my pleasure to introduce all three of New Mexico's members of Congress, one of whom has joined us before, and the others we're welcoming for the first time. Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury represents New Mexico's 1st Congressional District, including much of the Albuquerque area. She's a former state lawmaker, and in Congress, she serves on the House Committee on Natural Resources and the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability. So welcome, Congresswoman. We have Congressman Gabe Vasquez. I think he is on his way here as well, representing New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District, which also contains significant parts of the Albuquerque metro area. He's a first-generation American, lived on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border growing up, built a successful company from the ground up, and is a former Las Cruces City Councilor. He serves on the House Agriculture Committee and House Armed Services Committee. Welcome, Congressman. And we also have Congresswoman Teresa Fernandez, representing New Mexico's 3rd Congressional District. She's a 17th generation Northern New Mexican, born in Las Vegas, New Mexico. She was part of the state's first Head Start class. She went on to graduate from Yale and Stanford Law School. She serves on the House Rules Committee as ranking member of its subcommittee on legislative and budget process, and also on the House Committee on Natural Resources as the ranking member of its subcommittee on Indian and Insular Affairs. Welcome. Our aim today is to have a fairly fast-paced conversation about 6 different topics. Leaders from the business community, each of whom are board members of the chamber, will ask our questions today. Each question will be directed toward one of our representatives, and after he or she responds, our other representatives will have the chance to add any thoughts they may have on the topic. And toward the end of our program, we hope to have time to give each of our representatives an open-ended opportunity to talk with us about other things they're working on or other issues that weren't covered in our questions. Mike Canfield, former chamber board chair and president and CEO of the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center, has our first question, which is a 2-parter. The first part will be directed to Congresswoman Stansbury, and the second part to Congressman Vasquez. Mike, take it away.
Thanks, Janice. And since Representative Vasquez isn't with us, then Representative Stansbury gets the floor for as long as she needs to answer and speak with us on any topic she would like. So first off, Representative Stansbury, thanks for all you do and the hard work you're doing. In fact, you're doing right now today. Thank you for that and all the work for you do for the Albuquerque community. And I have to say thank you for all you do for the Native community too. So on behalf of my group, thank you. So, you know, the last time we talked, I think it was at this event, Democrats controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House. And so the balance of power has kind of shifted a little bit. And we're all curious to know, you know, we're headed towards that highly partisan election. And how has this changed what you do day to day? I mean, how are you dealing with that? I guess we're kind of interested in that. And how do you think that it has impacted policymaking in our nation's capital?
All right. Well, good afternoon. It's great to be with you all. And it looks like that Congressman Vasquez is with us now. So I will forbear on going too long. But, you know, what I will say is this, is that I don't actually see what's happening in Congress as being hyper partisan right now. What I see happening is hyper dysfunction. And it's in part because within the House GOP in particular, you know, there are dozens of members who are serving currently who, whatever your politics are out there, came in under the wave of Trumpism, if you will. And many of them are committed to ideology and to really disrupting the normal process here in Congress. And I mean, that is really their intent. And so these are folks like Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Andy Biggs, the Freedom Caucus folks that you see on the news day after day. And so what has happened is that it's virtually impossible to get any meaningful legislation through Congress right now. And it really isn't a partisan issue. It's infighting happening within the GOP's own party right now. So what I can sort of tell you, and you guys have been following this in the news, is, you know, we started this Congress last January. It took 15 votes for them to even get a speaker. And then they chose a speaker, Kevin McCarthy. And part of the deal in choosing that speaker is that a number of those disruptive members chose to be on the Rules Committee, which controls what legislation goes to the floor, as well as these really important committees of jurisdiction like Oversight and Energy and Commerce and others. And they've used that opportunity to be disruptive in the process. And so there isn't a day that doesn't pass when we're here in Washington, D.C., where we don't see the insanity unfolding. In fact, I literally 5 minutes ago took a vote on a bill entitled Hands Off Our Home Appliances. I mean, literally, this is the kind of legislating they're doing in lieu of passing meaningful legislation. It was manifest in the fall, in October, when they took out Kevin McCarthy. They spent almost 2 months not being able to choose another speaker. They almost bankrupted our economy over the fiscal cliff. They took us to 4 different brinks of shutting down the government. And now they're talking about another motion to recommit to take out the speaker once again. So it's very chaotic here and very difficult to get legislation passed. Now, in spite of that, I will say that all of us in the delegation do bipartisan work, and there are some non-controversial bills that have slipped through the process, but the really big things have just been impossible to get done. And, you know, we just took a vote 2 weeks ago on a foreign aid package. It took 6 months to get that bill even on the floor because of the infighting that's happening in the GOP. And thank God we did, because Western democracy literally depends on it. So it's just a dysfunctional time here in Congress. I think that the next election is consequential, not just for, you know, however you think about who you want representing you, but if you want a functional government, this can't continue. It really can't.
Well, thank you for what you do, and keep up your fortitude and hang in there. We see the frustration back home. We think we understand it. So thanks for dealing with it, and thanks for your vote on the appliances thing. I think that's going to be important. So I appreciate it. I'm going to switch over to Representative Vasquez, and we introduced you, Representative, before you got on. So we reviewed your resume and took about 20 or 30 minutes with highlights of your life. And so sorry you missed that. But I'm going to switch a question over to you and jump right into it. Kind of a wild way to usher in your first term, watching that contested battle over the House Speaker, which we just talked about, and kind of seems to go on and on. So we appreciate you joining this event, and we appreciate how accessible you have been to the business community. So I guess we're also interested from your perspective, what has surprised you about serving in Congress, and what are your thoughts about the new state's congressional map? I mean, that's another one we're interested in your thoughts about. So maybe you could share some thoughts on those two items for us.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Mike. And I want to thank everybody who's joining today. I appreciate having developed a relationship with you all early on as I was running for Congress. And now that I'm in the seat, having that constant conversation about what is important to the business community in the greater Albuquerque area. I think Congresswoman Stansbury, obviously expressed a lot of the same frustrations that I have with just the gridlock that exists here. But I think, in terms of surprises, I kind of knew what the job was when I came in. I knew how deeply divided this country was getting. Obviously, I didn't know we were going to be necessarily in the minority, but I think, most of the signs pointed to that. And so I prepared myself to be in the minority. So I chose to serve on the Agriculture and Armed Services Committee because we have two very important bills for New Mexico. The Farm Bill, which gets authorized every 5 years, and then the Armed Services National Defense Authorization Act, which is also very critically important to New Mexico, considering, that those dollars aren't just for national defense, but for local economies, for rural economies, to support our, servicemen and their families. And so getting to work on the Farm Bill and the National Defense Authorization Act now over the period of about 1.5 years, because we kicked the Farm Bill can down the road, because of the congressional gridlock. That's been very fruitful. That's where I have found some of the best opportunities to work in a bipartisan way with Republican members that truly want to get things done. And so, getting things for New Mexico that are included in both of those bills is something that I consider to be a fruitful process, despite how sometimes just slow things move here, if they move at all. But one of the surprising things to me is that there are some really good Republicans out there who are willing to work with us across the aisle on a lot of different bills, which is why I've been able to introduce a lot of bipartisan bills related to border security and to immigration, related to the economy, related to education in our tribal schools. So there's a lot of folks that, as much as we have kind of this handful of very extreme Republicans, we also have, I think, some very well-meaning Republicans, especially new freshman Republican members, that are also tired of the gridlock, that want to be able to work productively. And so, although it is a ton of chaos, building relationships across the aisle has been really helpful. And I know that's something that our entire delegation does. In terms of the new congressional map, I was a city councilor in Las Cruces, as most of you know, and I was really frustrated with just the inattention, the lack of attention to the district's largest city. I can say this personally because I sent, correspondence to our former Congresswoman, and I didn't know what the map was going to look like. I did not engage in any conversations or in the process that had anything to do with the congressional district map would look like. I wanted to run for Congress in this district as it sat. If the district would have stayed the same, my campaign would have continued the same as it did when, I declared in September of 2021, months before the district got declared, and certainly many more months before the Supreme Court decided the district. And so I'm really happy with the way the district is now, because I get to represent these new vibrant communities in the South Valley and on the west side of Albuquerque. I get to include also Isleta Pueblo in my district. And those are places that I've really gotten to know intimately as I've traveled across the state, but spent a lot of time because it's a significant portion of our voting base. And so that's really important to me, is that I do my job to represent Albuquerque and share that responsibility with Congresswoman Stansbury as we work together to make sure that the city gets what it needs and the county gets what it needs. And so it's honestly been great. And I've built some amazing relationships with business leaders in the South Valley. And I make sure that anytime I'm there, whether it's the South Valley or the West Side, I always highlight a small business or a local business to make sure that, I'm at least doing my part of at least marketing some of our folks who work so hard, to provide services and goods to the community.
Well, I would thank you too, Representative, for the work you do and you're doing now, and the work you do for our Albuquerque and our Native communities. Thank you for that. I'll turn it over to Bruce, and we'll continue on. So, Bruce.
Great, thank you, Mike. Let's move on to our next topic, and that is national defense. And welcome, Representative Ledger Fernandez. We are so glad you were able to join us. And this question is going to be directed to you, and then we'll go to the other representatives for any additional thoughts they may have. Terry has this question. Terry, go ahead.
Thank you, Bruce. So good afternoon, Representative Ledger Fernandez. It's great to see you. Thanks for being here. This is a two-part question on the subject of national defense. You represent Los Alamos National Laboratory, which has provided New Mexico with such a rich opportunity to contribute to our nation's defense and to the advancement of science generally. What would you say is New Mexico's most important contribution today to solving the defense challenges we currently face? And on that point, given the wars raging between Russia and Ukraine and Israel and its neighbors, what do you believe is our nation's most serious international threat?
Okay, so you gave me the easy one. So, you are absolutely right. I have the benefit of representing Lanel. We have Sandia in Albuquerque. Thank you very much. Let me begin there by inviting me into the Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce, even though I don't have any of Albuquerque in my district. But we know that Albuquerque is an important commercial hub for the entire state. And the great thing about our delegation is we all work together. Representative Stansbury and I were with land grants together as we introduced a bill today. We were on the floor of the House. We'll be on the floor of the House tag teaming tomorrow as she manages a floor debate on one of the bills. And so we all work very well together because we understand how interconnected our economic activity is in New Mexico, or interconnected our familias are, right? I'm from Las Vegas, New Mexico, but I have a brother living in Albuquerque now, and we're all interconnected, and that's the beauty of New Mexico. And our labs are doing important work that isn't just about the fact that we are known for nuclear capabilities. We just saw Oppenheimer, but we are also known for nuclear non-proliferation work we do at the labs. And we are at the forefront of what's happening with intelligence, what's happening with the technological advances that we need as we make sure we have eyes on what's happening at the satellite level. So it's lasers, it's intelligence, it's anti-nuclear proliferation. It's all of those issues are very key. And what I think is really interesting is that our labs are also at the forefront of what I like to call the enchanted innovation economy, because New Mexico is going to have an enchanted innovation economy, especially as we move and we transition, and it's going to be a transition to this new economy. The labs are going to be key for that. I've spent a lot of time at Lanel, as you can imagine, both in national security briefings, but importantly with Lanel entrepreneurs and the work they are doing to make sure that we have that technology transfer, how we're getting quantum dots where you can put them on the windows so that we can transfer the energy of the sun into the energy a building might need, where we are looking at how do we slingshot satellites into the air and into space. And all of this is done by entrepreneurs. And so what I've done recently is I have made sure that in our appropriations bills that we are looking at how does our legislative language, how do our laws make sure that we can continue this? Because the reality is actually Lanel is not one of our top technology transfer labs in the country. I want it to become a top technology transfer lab. So I've worked directly with them about how do we do that? What is the money that we need to put in on the, we're just finished the appropriations process on our part where we're putting in the language we want. But also what language do we need to change so that there is more flexibility on that? And I have requests in to actually have appropriation language that will lead to more of that. So that's on the first stage. The issues about the national security threats is, there are multiple, but right now we have the trifecta of Russia, Ukraine, and Israel, and Russia, Ukraine, Israel, and we have China. The China, Iran, and Russia, they are interconnected. And we need to recognize that one of our biggest threats is tyranny, authoritarianism, and fascism, and a desire to kind of reconquer parts of the world in as Russia is trying to do in Ukraine, as China is trying to do in the Indo-Pacific, as Iran is trying to do in the Middle East. We need to recognize the threat and the relationship that they have with each other. I was one of 4 Democrats on the Rules Committee that made sure with our votes, first time, kind of a historic vote, to make sure that we got the funding bills out so that they could go to the floor for the vote. If we would have taken that vote for the Ukraine funding 6 months ago, Russia would not have had the military advances it did. Very disappointed. I am very disappointed that there were, Putin protecting Republicans. It shocks me. The Republican Party and so many in it, with the chair of the Republican Party said, we have always stood against Soviet and Russia imperialism and expansionism, and yet we delayed this vote for 6 months. We finally got it done, but it's that kind of pushing back against that authoritarianism, tyranny, and fascism, and we need to do that both internationally, and the reality is we need to do it at home as well. And so I think that we need to recognize that democracy in America, democracy in the world is always both fragile and evolving. And we always need to be defending it and standing up with our allies. The last thing I would also mention is that a lot of the money from those that we're doing with the Ukrainian funding actually, and it's going to support work in New Mexico. We are doing anti-tank guided missiles in Deney and Farmington. We're working on the Javelin anti-tank missiles. It's coming out of Farmington. We actually have in my district, I don't think in Albuquerque, I think a lot of it is in my district, those funding bills that are going to support our allies are actually going to also help with our businesses in New Mexico.
Thank you.
Excellent. Representative Stansbury and Vasquez, we are a little behind schedule here, but if you guys have brief comments that you'd like to add to Representative Fernandez's answer there, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and just add on. So I represent the 1st Congressional District, which is predominantly Albuquerque and central New Mexico, and it includes Kirtland Air Force Base and Sandia National Labs. And for those of you that work in national defense or in related industries, you know the crucial role that both Sandia and Kirtland play in our national defense and our security apparatus. And certainly now that I'm a member of Congress, I understand it even better because I understand its role within the entire global national security picture, including and not limited to its role in arms manufacturing and design, as well as non-proliferation and deterrence, as Congresswoman Fernandez said. But Kirtland is also about to have the largest wing expansion since it was built. And so we're about to welcome over 1,000 new members of the Air Force to Albuquerque. And so this is going to have major implications for our economy, housing, services, all of that. And also, obviously, Sandia Labs just plays a crucial role both in national security and in innovation. New Mexico is also a major hub through partnerships both with the Air Force research labs that are at the Kirtland Air Force Base and Sandia, massive public-private partnerships. And we have a huge and burgeoning aerospace industry in Albuquerque, and we're fighting to get more components of Space Force moved to the Air Force Research Lab that is located on Kirtland Base. So all of those things will have very significant implications for economic expansion in Albuquerque. They're important for national and global security. And then I would be remiss if I didn't also note that we are home to the Veterans Hospital in Albuquerque, and we serve all of the veterans that are in our region. And so a lot of the work that I do in my congressional office is partnering with Kirtland, partnering with Air Force, partnering with the labs and DOE, partnering with the Veterans Administration, and all of the associated private industries and nonprofit entities that are a part of both national security and veteran services. So it's a huge component of our work. And if anyone is interested to talk more, please come talk to me about it. In terms of national security, global security, I think Congresswoman Fernandez touched on this. I would say, at the moment, the largest threat to American national security is what's happening in Ukraine. Without armed support for Ukraine, if Putin were successful in his exploits there, we could be looking at invasions of other NATO countries, which would mean U.S. service member involvement. And that's why passing that Ukraine package was so essential. But China is also growing in its interests in the United States. And that's why it was also very important that we advance a national security package that strengthens our allies like Taiwan. So lots of big issues going on, and New Mexico is right in the center of it.
Representative Vasquez, anything to add?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. Look, I represent White Sands Missile Range, the NASA testing facility that tests some of JPL's rockets that are going to power some of our most important missile defense systems, and also Holloman Air Force Base, where currently we have one of the only sled tracks in the country that can test these really important hypersonic weapons. We're in an arms race right now with China and Russia, and in particular, it's having the development and the deployment of advanced hypersonics. And New Mexico has a amazing role to play in that, and at White Sands Missile Range, obviously with a huge territory for us to be able to test these weapons, but also developing the technology to test them itself. Right now we're talking about massive costs just to test hypersonics to match what we've seen China that has developed or has claimed to develop is really important. So that's a key part of our district in terms of how it plays into national defense capabilities and this arm race that we're in with China. So I'll leave it there.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Our third topic relates to the southern border. And as you'd expect for that topic, we're going to go first to Representative Vasquez, followed by the other representatives. And Janice Torres has this question. Janice, go ahead.
Thanks, Bruce. And thank you, Representative Vasquez, for all your efforts around the southern border. You are one of a surprisingly small number of lawmakers in Washington who represent our nation's southern border with Mexico in the Chamber's public safety work. Local and federal law enforcement tell us often that the pace at which fentanyl is streaming across our border, all the volume of it is unlike anything that we've ever seen. We're losing people to fentanyl overdoses at an alarming rate, many of them young people. Do you feel that the federal government has a grasp on the problem? And is there something in our relationship with the government of Mexico or in how we deal with cartels operating in our country or in how we police and punish drug trafficking that you believe we should be doing differently?
Thank you so much for that question, Janice. And this is one of the reasons that I'm here in Congress, is to represent that perspective of a member of Congress that has lived on both sides of the border. But also, before I was doing this job almost a decade ago, I was the chairman of the co-chairman of the Southwest Border Security Task Force. And I was working with local sheriff's department, with state police, with Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection at that time to inform the New Mexico public along our border communities about the trends of immigration and some of the dangers that we faced. Now, that experience has got me on horseback, on ATV, traveling with Border Patrol to understand the technology that currently exists, things like AST towers and heliostat balloons, trip sensors. There's so much that we've invested in along the border when it comes to illegal immigration and drug trafficking. Now, the situation we're seeing at the border today is obviously quite different, and I think we have to be able to differentiate the different issues and the problems that we face at the border. One is the asylum seeker humanitarian crisis that we are seeing. Two, which is much different, is the trafficking of fentanyl into our country. And so I've proposed legislation that addresses both of those issues. When it comes to fentanyl, today we have the technology. In fact, at the Sanitary Support of Entry, there's a pilot program underway that I think we should replicate across the country to every port of entry, which is why I've introduced the Smart Border Protection Act, where we are going from maybe 12 to 14% of the inspection of commercial cargo at our ports of entry that is smuggling fentanyl, and everything from onion crates to travertine tile that is now almost able to get to 100% inspection. Now, this is advanced technology that uses AI, that requires more CBP agents, but allows us to be able to inspect trucks in a touchless way and identify this illicit cargo. Now, this is smart policy. This is something that the administration has called on Congress to do, and something the administration wants to do. But again, this is one of those bills that, although it is a bipartisan bill I've introduced, is locked up in partisan politics. And even though we have a solution today to halt the shipping of fentanyl into our country, which more than 90%, comes through ports of entry, at least what we're able to apprehend and document, it would be an easy solution for us to do. But we need the manpower and we need the technology. So that's a bill that I think once we're in the majority, we will be able to pass. We will be able to make sure that not just for commercial technology, but we're also conducting a pilot program on non-commercial vehicles, so that folks that are crossing over the border on a daily basis also go through similar non-intrusive X-ray technology that doesn't harm the people, but also allows agents to move traffic much faster, which is good. In fact, this type of technology actually would speed up international commerce. And as we're seeing that Mexico is our largest trading partner, and we're seeing Doña Ana County, be the largest net exporting county in the state, that surpassed, I think, Bernalillo County maybe 3 or 4 years ago. This would actually increase the job creation potential in New Mexico, in addition to keeping us safer. I mean, that's a win-win solution. That is a good proposal. And so that's something that we should be able to do. And that's something that when I go talk to the port directors at Antelope Wells or at Columbus and Palomas or Santa Teresa, I say, this is really good work, but we need the agents, because right now our agents are overworked, and we also need the technology. So if we can do this in places like Otay Mesa, we can do this in Zaragoza or San Isidro, or places like Eagle Pass, we can reduce the amount of fentanyl that comes into our communities. However, again, we have to have the political will to be able to work on these common sense solutions. It's not something I've seen, although I do have Republicans on this bill. It's going to take the majority, of course, to be able to come together and realize that there's solutions on the table, and we should be doing things that are common sense. Last thing I'll say on this is that, we can't forget that the market for opioids was created by pharmaceutical companies in this country. And we also have to deal now with the fallout of what that means for the mental health and for the impact to our families and our communities, which is another place where we're investing. That's just on the supply side. The demand side also requires our attention, and it requires our leadership. That means that we have to make sure that folks who are currently addicted to opioids like fentanyl or otherwise have the opportunity to get to treatment, to get back into good paying jobs, to take care of their families, and to be productive members of society. And that's one of the other things that I think we're passionate about as a delegation in terms of tackling this issue of fentanyl in our communities. I'll pass it over.
Okay, thank you. So I'll say Representative Stansbury and Ledger Fernandez, given our time challenges here and in respect of our audience, unless you've got something that you urgently want to add on this topic, I'm just going to ask you to save it for the very end, where you can have a few minutes of whatever you want to address. So we'll move on to topic number 4, which is the energy transition in New Mexico. And we're going to start with Representative Stansbury on this one. Representative Stansbury, the chamber continues to support a deliberate, smart transition to cleaner energy in both the power generation and transportation sectors, in particular. New Mexico can and should be a national leader, not only in oil and gas production, but in so many other types of energy as well. We wanted to ask you about two energy frontiers specifically. What do you believe is the role of hydrogen in our emerging energy economy? And what about nuclear power, which is entirely carbon-free and becoming increasingly portable?
All right, well, thank you. So I'll start at the highest level, just explaining kind of the current context. So as many of you know, I've worked as a science professional throughout my career, working especially on water issues. And of course, water and energy are interrelated. Right now, the global economy is going through a major energy transition. It's necessary because of climate change, and it's also just the direction the planet is going. And everyone from, global investors and capital are moving in that direction, to major infrastructure and all of our grid, to all of the things that use electricity and use energy in our economy. And so we are literally living through history right now. And to support that transition, to make it more equitable, to make it more efficient, to make it quicker in order to address the challenges of climate change and pollution, we passed 2 summers ago the most significant clean energy package ever in American history, and in fact, ever in the history of any country anywhere on the planet, with the Inflation Reduction Act. And that bill is making billions of dollars of investments across every sector of the economy. We're already seeing in New Mexico a number of our municipal and electric cooperatives tapping into the money for energy transition of the grid. Lots of towns and nonprofits are getting money for charging stations for electric vehicles. Homes are getting weatherized. So the transition is affecting every aspect of our life. The 2 specific technologies that we're asked about are technologies that are a part of the energy transition mix, but in different kinds of ways. So the promise of hydrogen and closed hydrogen systems, as long as they don't emit additional carbon, have the potential to be an important fuel for the future, especially for airplanes and things like that. The problem is that a lot of the current technologies that are being explored actually are net carbon emitters. And so that doesn't help us with the energy transition if they're actually contributing to climate change as well. So it depends on the technology, it depends on the deployment, and it depends on how it's ultimately going to be used when it comes to hydrogen. When it comes to nuclear energy is a very powerful source of energy. It's used in our nuclear submarines, it's used for electricity generation, it's used in locations where there's limited energy supplies. And in some places it is appropriate, but I think it is not the silver bullet that many people believe it is, because we have not figured out what to do with waste yet. And we still do not have a permanent waste site for spent nuclear fuel. And so while there is a desire to massively expand nuclear energy, there's still not a responsible way to dispose of the fuel itself. So it's not exactly a clean energy in the way that folks are hoping that it'll be. So for New Mexico, we are already on the forefront of the transition. We've cut ribbon in the last 6 months on the largest wind project in North America out in Santa Fe and Torrance counties. Maxion is coming to Albuquerque, which is the first manufacturer to reshore to make solar panels in the United States since we passed the IRA. Intel is making the largest expansion of a chip factory in North America in Rio Rancho. I mean, we are on the front line of the energy transition and we're killing it. Now, our challenge is to figure out how to make sure our grid and our people really benefit from that transition. They get the jobs, and ultimately we solve the global crisis. So.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. Representative Vasquez and Fernandez, anything to add to Representative Stansbury's comments?
So I know we're close on time, but I do think that both for Representative Vasquez's comment, but I think we need to remember that fentanyl is coming from China. And that we need to remember that there was a difference of making sure their borders are secure, as well as being very respectful of our immigrant population and how much value they add. And I know your business people, you know how important the immigrant population is in terms of for our economy. And with regards to, you know, the transition, I am, you know, I was so excited about voting for the Inflation Reduction Act, which is about bringing down the cost of so many things, but also doing that investment so that we actually have a beautiful place we call home to pass on to our children, our grandchildren, and, you know, the generations down the line, but it's at the 8th generation, right? So I think it's really key that we focus on that as well.
And I'll just add, look, here in New Mexico, we both have the most productive oil and gas sector in the country, in the Permian Basin, and also the 2 largest renewable energy transmission projects. And so that means in all the above energy strategy that as we create that transition, we should be able to both produce fossil fuels cleaner and at the same time add these renewable energy jobs that are going to be the future for these economies, because fossil fuels aren't going to be there forever. And I think it's our job as representatives to make sure that those communities have a lifeline, that they have economic opportunities, that young people in the trades today, whether they're welders or pipe fitters or truck drivers, have a chance to continue to stay in their communities. And so I think collectively as a delegation, including in the Senate, we're doing the best that we can to make sure that that we're doing those things to protect the environment and at the same time protect jobs.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Representative Vasquez. We're going to go to our next topic now, which is education in public schools. And we're going to start this with Mike Canfield with the question, and he's going to give it to Representative Ledger Fernandez first. So Mike, go ahead with the question. There you go. It hit your mute there, Mike.
One of these days I'll figure it out. Representative, it's always nice to see you. Miss seeing you in Santa Fe. I'm sure you're there a lot, but I miss seeing you. So thank you for all the work you do for us here in our state, and especially on behalf of the Native population. Thank you for that. So, you know, as you know, much of our policymaking on education in America happens at the state level. However, beginning with the Obama administration, federal government has really begun to take a more active role in providing funding to help launch and grow charter schools across the country. They've invested more than $450 million a year in bringing new and different public school options to inner cities and rural areas alike. In New Mexico, this funding helped grow schools like NACA, the Native American Community Academy, or Mission Achievement and Success in Albuquerque, which, by the way, serves low income student population and has received nearly 100% graduation rate for the past 5 years. So what is your take on how public charter schools fit into the education landscape? And do you support funding to continue to help launch and grow charter schools in New Mexico?
Hello, Mike. It's always a pleasure to see you. You know, as you know, but people might not know that, you know, the Native American Community Academy, I was working with Mike when we were working on different kinds of issues with regards to it there at the Indian Pueblo Marketing, IPMI, the Cultural Center. And we did that because we recognized how important that charter school was for a unique subset of our student body that wanted to be able to succeed in their educational endeavors in a place that was also culturally respectful and relevant to their own histories and their own life experiences. And they are now sending kids, you know, to the Ivies. They're sending them to UNM, to Tech, to all our own great schools. And it's an example of what you want. I can say I'm supportive of charter schools. I also have a son. One of my 3 kids graduated from a charter school, the master's program. They're one of those wonderful dual degree programs. And so charter schools in that instance was for students who wanted to be able to get a little head start on their degree, could go to the master's program. You have a couple of good ones like that in Albuquerque. And we look at the different charter schools that are in Santa Fe or in Taos in Las Vegas. They are looking to create a smaller school that is responsive to a need that students are asking for in that school district. So I support charter schools. Now, I also recognize there are a lot of charter schools that open and don't make it, right? They don't have the leadership they needed. They don't have the oversight. So we need to recognize that there are sometimes charter schools that fail our students, and we need to make sure we have accountability for all our schools, for all our students, because there might be promise there, but not the carry through. You are absolutely right. The federal government, on all aspects of education, we add just that extra little bit, right? Because it's a state issue. But the extra little bit that we add at the federal level is very important. And so making sure that that extra little bit is as applicable and accessible to charter schools is very important. We just actually had the Secretary of Education before the Education and Labor Committee today, talking about his budget. One of the things he and I talked about at that thing was the issue of being bilingual is a superpower. So for students who are attending certain charter schools, being bilingual, whether it's making sure you know Dene. I actually had the Miss Gallup Intertribal Little Miss on the floor of the house today. Go check it out. She was so cute, the most poised 8-year-old I know, who spoke fluent Navajo, wowed the former speaker, wowed Hakeem Jeffries, right? But her Dene language, her Navajo language was very important to her. And so we need to make sure we also support dual language, right? Whatever that bilingual language might be, and that's something you might have at a charter school. Title I schools. I have really pushed to make sure that Title I schools, which are those schools that are our highest poverty schools. And guess what? We have over 700 Title I schools in New Mexico. We need to make sure that our funding goes to that. We have. The president did request an increase for the budget for the Title I schools, about $200 million over 2024. We're going to have to fight for that because there is disagreement between the two parties up here as to whether we should be funding education at the federal level. I do think that we have a role to play because it is this innovation that happens in charter schools, but happens in lots of other things that the federal government can play a role with. It is this addressing issues like Title I schools where poverty in the community might hold a school back from being able to offer everything it can. It is issues like mental health, bringing mental health programs into schools. So I think the federal government has a role to play in charter schools, but in helping guide educational policy and giving that little extra assistance that is needed. As I pointed out, over 700 of our schools in New Mexico rely on the extra federal funding they get, and we need to keep providing that. We need to keep providing it for school-based mental health, as I mentioned, for for teacher training, for teacher certification. These are all things that the federal government helps with, and I want to make sure that we continue to help with that. And thank you for the work that you've done on education issues, Mr. Canfield, in both your role there at the Cultural Center, but I know you have also served the public on education issues, and for that I thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you.
All right.
Bruce, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So in the interest of time, again, we're going to skip one of the questions that we had planned because we want to leave, even though we're right at our time right now, for our audience, we're going to go over just a little bit here, given that we got a late start. And instead of answering this last question, we're going to just turn it over to our representatives for you guys to address any other topic that's on your mind right now or that you're working on that you'd like to bring to the attention of our audience and our membership. So we'll start in the order of our districts. So that means you first, Representative Stansbury.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Well, I'll actually just pick up on the rest of the conversation and kind of weave it all together. So as many of you know, as you've met with us and my team, and we've participated in other forums, my work as your Congresswoman is focused on the needs of the community. And so I spend the vast majority of my time in New Mexico, in our communities. During my 3 years of serving in the House, we've held hundreds, if not thousands, of community meetings, consultations, and conversations with people in the community. And we organize the work in my office around 3 major policy buckets. The first is the economy, economic development. How do we revitalize New Mexico's economies? How do we invest in mom and pop businesses, which are the backbone of our economy? How do we revitalize our rural communities, invest in our tribal economic opportunities? And so a lot of the work in my office is heavily focused on that. The second bucket that we do work in is community well-being. And at the very top of that list is safety and the behavioral health crisis. Especially in Albuquerque, we all know that crime and public safety are paramount. It's the #1 issue that everyone is most concerned about. And a lot of it is being driven by the fentanyl crisis, although we have long suffered from violent crime and property crime issues. But the surge in crime has really ramped up since fentanyl has become so pervasive in our communities. And I do want to just say that, you know, as somebody who has lost a loved one from the fentanyl crisis, there is no one who is spared. And I think the question earlier about, is there more that we can be doing? The answer is yes, and we have to. We need more intervention at the border. We need more technology at the border. We need more staffing at the border. We've got to stop the flow of both fentanyl and the raw materials coming into our state. We've got to crack down on it on the streets and get it off of the streets once it's there. And that requires investing in public safety and our policing. And we've got to help people who are addicted safely get off of fentanyl and into recovery. And that means fixing our behavioral health system. So that is really the top issue that my office is heavily focused on. Much of my community engagement projects have been focused on funding behavioral health and public safety programs. Tied to that is also housing. We have an affordable housing crisis. We have a housing crisis, period, in New Mexico, whatever your income is. And so we're doing a lot of work on housing and homelessness issues, a lot of work around rural healthcare, because there's not a single person in New Mexico, myself included, who can't get in to see a specialist for our healthcare system. Trying to address some of the business aspects of what's broken around our healthcare system and provider shortages, and a lot around public safety and emergency services in our rural areas. And then finally, our office is heavily focused also on land and water issues, partly because of my background and passion around those issues, but also because water is life. Water drives everything in our state. So I have actually passed more water bills last Congress than any other member of Congress. Not all of them got across the finish line, so we're working on those again. They include bills to bring more money home to rebuild infrastructure for the Rio Grande and for our pueblos, to support our acequias. As Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez said, we just reintroduced the land grant bill for our land grants. And we do a lot of work right now on the farm bill and agriculture issues, and of course trying to help promote and advance the energy transition so that we can save our planet. So lots of good work going on, and I will pass it back and just say thank you all so much for giving us this opportunity. And please know my office is here to serve. And I'll say one last thing, which is we offer also a lot of constituent services. So if anyone out there needs help, whether that's with veterans issues, Social Security, or you know folks that are having issues with the federal government, SBA, anybody, our offices are designed to help with those kind of issues. So please come to us. All of us can help with those things. And
Great.
that's.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you so much. We're going to switch the order up a little bit because I understand that Representative Ledger Fernandez is on a tight schedule here. So give you a couple of minutes here to provide any additional comments that you have. Go ahead, Representative.
Once again, I just thank you for inviting me. And there's so much we work on. And as Melanie pointed out, it is reflective of what our district needs are. I always talk about that our job is to bring the voices of our community here to Congress. And I need to tell you, those voices ring loud in our corridors, which you can see by the results that all three of us have brought home to New Mexico. The next bill that I'm dropping, we dropped the land grant bill today. I got passed in the federal appropriations bill, a tribal nutrition bill. You'll like that one, Mike. But we're actually getting things passed in a bipartisan fashion right now. I'm doing a Home of Your Own Act that will drop. That's based on, you have HomeWise there. As you know, I sat as on the executive of HomeWise for about 24 years. And we have a pilot project of home ownership assistance, down payment assistance, because that's when you need the help. So we have a pilot program on that going, federally funded, and we want to take it national. So that's my next bill that I'll be dropping this week. I would suggest, because we don't have enough time, sign up for our newsletters. We all have these amazing newsletters. We cannot put you on them. Go to our websites. The only thing you see is sign up for our newsletters, because it will tell you what we are doing. They're short, they'll have, I'm on the floor every week because I sit on rules. And so I go and manage the debate every week. I'm on there. You'll see what I'm talking about. Fernandez.house.gov. And with regards to something that all of our offices do, I call it the WD-40 for the federal agencies, as Melanie said, our constituent services, because things get stuck. And so we have these big cans of WD-40 and we loosen things up. For those of you who are, I love the fact that the contractor who builds things is laughing about the WD-40, right? So, and then the other thing that we have that as a delegation we offer is if you have a great idea and you wonder if there's some federal funding for it, guess what? Our delegation is unique in that we have a grant finder. So you can find that, that federal grant and the haystack of federal funding opportunities, it's hard to find them. We have a grant finder. You tell us what your idea is there some great, those charter schools have a great idea. They would like to start something up. We can help you do that. And it basically comes back to we serve you. It is an act of love that brings us to serve. And so, help us spread that love. Let us know what you need. And with that, although we started late, it's the darn congressional schedule. It is ridiculous. We do not control it. We cannot control our calendar. So thank you so very much for having us all there. Muchísimas gracias y adiós y que vaya bien. Everybody do well.
Thank you so much, Representative. And to our audience, I apologize, but Representative Vasquez did have a hard stop and had to step out. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Janice Torres for a few closing comments before we adjourn. Janice?
Thank you, Bruce. And muchísimas gracias to our members of Congress for stepping forward and undertaking the tremendous commitment of representing New Mexico and Washington, D.C. Each of you in your own way have a tremendous personal American dream story to tell. It's inspiring, and like you, our chamber works every day to ensure that the opportunity to pursue and achieve the American dream is alive and well for the next generation. I think that's where we can find common ground. How do we ensure that our country educates its children well, remains the world's beacon of freedom, supports people who have a vision to turn their ideas into businesses, and leads the world in advancement of technology, science, and medicine? As a business community, we haven't lost optimism that we can lead on these fronts. And despite the tone of our politics, we think it's more important than ever to restore a sense of civil discourse, bipartisan cooperation, and respect for long-standing institutions and norms. So it's in that spirit that we continue to host events like these, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to bring what's happening in Washington back home to New Mexico. So with that, we'd like to once again thank our great sponsors of today's event, and we look forward to seeing everyone this month for our Education Big Luncheon, June 12th. back on May 29th for our business beat with UNM President Garnett Stokes and 3 of the university's top leaders on the upcoming bond and mill levy ballot. And on June 25th, we'll have our downtown big luncheon with Mayor Tim Keller at the DoubleTree. And until then, thank you again for joining, and we'll see you all soon.